uh, my life has been after our last interview.
Well, great.
How many people said, "Oh, wow, putting that together was wonderful for them." So thank you for this opportunity to do it again.
Ah, you're very welcome.
Yeah.
Yes, Vanessa, you don't know this, but when I was visiting Bruce, actually Pamela and I, we went to Bruce's home. And when we walked into Bruce's home, I felt like I was at home, at his home. Everything was just so nice. It just fit me perfectly like a glove, you know.
Come back and try it again.
So Bruce and I just got along really, really well. You know,
Yeah.
it was a love in, and he told me that he was a little concerned that a physicist coming, I might challenge his basic assumptions and things, but
Fear.
yeah. Yeah. But as it turned out, we were on the same sheet of music. So Bruce and I have at least I do. I don't know how Bruce feels, but I have this kind of connection with Bruce that I really don't have any reason to have, but it's there because yeah, we connect very well. And
Yes.
Bruce, of course, from my point of view, his biology and his biology mind connection is a perfect working example of my theory. My theory would predict that it would be that way, and then Bruce finds it, and it is that way. So, of course, I'm thrilled with all the work that Bruce does because it and MBT just go together really, really well.
And I'm thrilled because when the physicist says, "Oh, okay, he's not so crazy."
That's good news. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Watching your interview that you did, that was what, I guess 5 years ago or something. It was quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was with Chuck and Karen from What If It Really Worked, I think.
Yeah.
They put that together.
Yeah, and it was excellent. That was actually my introduction because I came across your work, Bruce. I read The Biology of Belief a few years back, and then
Yes.
and then I saw the interview that you did with Tom, and that actually was my intro to Tom's work. And it really blew me away because it was the first time I could finally understand what Tom was saying was when he said Tom was true. Yeah.
Well, when it connects to the human, it gets a little more personal. So that that gives more reason to. Oh, it's affecting me. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, it was great. So I was excited to be able to facilitate this and just have you guys do another conversation together and see what gems come out of it.
I really hope it has some of the beautiful gems that we did before, but until we mine this, I have no idea what we're going to dig up.
Yeah, neither do I.
Yeah.
That's the best kind of interactions is when they just happen however they happen.
Yeah.
So this should be fun. I've been looking forward to this.
I again have the deepest appreciation and admiration for working with you in the past, because it does make a profound difference when, oh my God, he's not the only one saying this.
Well, not only that, the My Big Toe theory basically builds a scientific foundation underneath the things that you have found, with biology. And kind of gives an explanation of why not only does it work that way, but why must it work that way?
Yes.
It has to, that has to work that way because that's the nature of reality. Mind is fundamental, the physical is a derivative of mind. So mind leads, body follows. It's just the way it works.
Absolutely perfect. For me, that was a perfect thing to say. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hello, audience. Yeah. And first of all, let me thank all of you out there for a very simple and profound reason, is that if you're listening to this program, that means you are cultural creative. You are seeking answers outside the box. And that's where the answers are, because inside the box, it's not looking that good these days. So come and meet us outside the box here. It's a much more funful world than inside.
Yes, absolutely. That box is just full of beliefs that have been around for the last 100 years or 200 years. And it's time that we kind of get a bigger picture of what's really going on and explain many of the things that we've known existed for a long time, but we kind of well, at least within the box, they ignore it and deny it because it doesn't fit with their beliefs. So,
and their money, and
yeah,
their money.
yeah.
They'd rather not have us have power, because people make money when we feel we are victims or powerless. That's when they start selling us everything. Like, oh, you need this to get out of that victim place. It's like,
right.
no.
Absolutely. And when you're a victim, you give up your free will. You give up your intent. You give up basically all of that can make you, what you are and can make you succeed. Because a victim feels like they don't have any choices, that somebody else is running their life. So they stop trying. They stop actually taking responsibility for themselves. And instead, they sit around and complain and moan and get into, wallow in self-pity. And there's nothing I can do. Oh, woe is me. This is a terrible place. And when you're at that place, you've just cut yourself off from all the things you need to do, to find happiness and to find satisfaction and to find yourself, your own authenticity. So that victimhood is kind of the worst possible place that anybody could be in.
That's my story. And it should have been on my screen. I should have been saying that, but you said it better than I did. So I'm going to stick with your side of it, because that's exactly what the biology of belief really reveals, is that we're powerful creators until we believe we are not powerful creators, and then we're not. And the idea that's interesting about all this is that we have been programmed. That's a fact of life. We've all been programmed. And what's interesting is that knowledge of being programmed, that's 400 years old. The Jesuits used to tell people, still do, give me a child until it is 7 and I will show you the man. They were the first ones to recognize that the first 7 years, and that's coincidentally the correct year, the first 7 years, we download behavior by observing other people. And this is the foundation of our programming. And then we become that, because it turns out 95% of our life is not coming from our creative conscious mind, the one with wishes and desires. Mm-hmm. Only 5% comes from that. 95% comes from the program. And then I say, well, why is it relevant? Because it turns out about 70% of that program database is disempowering and self-sabotaging and limiting. So basically it says if 95% of your life is coming from the perspective, I'm a victim, I have no power, then unfortunately, then you manifest that, and then everybody's a victim. And it's time to wake up, because we're facing a mass extinction. That we're not facing it, we're in a mass extinction due to human consciousness. And as Tom can expertly talk about, the nature of consciousness in the world of quantum physics is the source of our life experiences. And so basically it says if your life experiences are not something you really want, you don't go out and change the world, you go in and change the consciousness.
Change yourself. Yeah.
And then the world will change from the outside.
Yes, absolutely. The only thing that you have the ability to change directly is yourself.
Yes.
And if you can change yourself, and if enough of us can change ourselves, then all the problems that we have, all of the things that we all rail against and think are detrimental to human growth, all those things will change on their own. They're a reflection of us. We create this reality, and we can create a terrible one in which we're all victims, or we can create one that is much more productive and much more filled with happiness and joy than with not. We have a couple of sources of this. You talk about that we get brainwashed, we get convinced that our reality is a certain way, and we get convinced that we're victims. Yep. And that convincing comes several ways. It comes directly from people telling us that, because like you say, it's in their advantage. If we have fear, then we are easily controlled. fear is a big handle on your back that allows somebody to, you know, grab hold of it and make you dance whatever dance they want. So that's why we have so much fear in the land. You know, that's why so many organizations are kind of based on fear. Politics is based on fear. You know, our law, our legal system is generally fear-based. Many of our religions are fear-based. So we have a fear-based culture, and then all the advertisers that want to frighten us so that we'll buy their products. You know, gee, if you don't drink this kind of beer, the girls won't like you. You know, and we get that picture all the time. But besides that, we're also part of a collective consciousness. All of us consciousnesses are connected together, and we form a collective consciousness in all sorts of levels, like in the, you know, culture is one of those.
Absolutely.
Even a family is one, a business is one. You know, everybody that works at IBM, you can kind of tell just by looking at them that, you know, that's where they work, because they've got the dress, they've got the suit, they've got the attitude, you know, they've got whatever. They have all the same opinions, and that's you know, corporate culture. So we have these cultures, and these cultures just represent a collective consciousness, in terms of, if you see yourself as part of a group, then you take on this connection to the collective consciousness that makes that group. So even though nobody sits us down and teaches us that this is a hard, cruel world and, you know, we're a victim here, we just get it without any direct instruction at all. It just oozes into us out of our experience here. And it's a very destructive thing that limits our potential tremendously.
Well, Tom, that's 100%. I just want to add the things that promote and provoke fear is the medical industry. The medical industry paints a picture that we're more or less victims of our genetics. And then we look at all health issues as, oh my God, I inherited these genes, and cardiovascular disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, all these things. And that enhances what you said about, well, I'm a victim. I didn't pick the genes, and as far as I know, you know, I can't change the genes, and if I don't like them, there you are, you're stuck with it, and your life is apparently programmed. And then all of a sudden, as soon as I see it, my life is programmed by genes that I don't control, I'm the victim. And then guess what? A pharmaceutical company comes in and says, we're going to save you, but it could cost you some money. I mean, I am astonished, because my brother had hepatitis C, and there was a drug treatment plan that is pretty effective. And it turns out that it's $1,000 a pill, $1,000 a pill, and 100 pills is the regimen. And basically said, oh, we can help you. It will only cost you $100,000. And it's like, oh my God. And the biggest issue about it is this: the belief that has been, you know, given to us of our victimization is the belief in what is called genetics, which is when they say, oh, that is under genetic control, that immediately takes you out of the program. Oh, the genes turn on and off and they create, that's the program. And it turns out 100% false, 100% false. There is no gene that turns on and off. A gene is a blueprint. And, you know, we're mixing up two words, causation and correlation. We attribute causation to genes, and that would mean that they control an activity. And the fact is, genes control nothing, including themselves. They're correlated with issues, but they're not causative. I say, well, you know, I mean, for example, there's no such thing as a cancer gene. There's no gene that causes cancer. They go, oh, well, so many women, you know, like Angelina, you know, Jolie, you know, has a double mastectomy because she has the BRCA gene. Her mother died of that cancer, her grandmother died, and then she goes out in the public saying, yes, I've had this mastectomy because I have this gene and I don't want the cancer. And then here comes a little question that says, you know, 50% of the women that have this gene never get the cancer. I go, why is it relevant? It's like, having the gene didn't cause cancer. It was having a lifestyle that, you know, precipitated that gene. And all of a sudden it says, oh, wait, that's personal responsibility, lifestyle. And I said, yes, and that's the foundation of the new science called epigenetics. The old science, genetic control, translates as control by genes. Everybody believes their characters are controlled by genes. A little sidebar, less than 1% of disease is connected to genetics. Wait a minute, 90+% of disease has nothing to do with genetics, but everything to do with consciousness and lifestyle, which is a reflection of our consciousness. And so I say the new science is called epigenetics. And you say, it sounds like genetics. I go, yeah, but epi means above. So when I say, what's the word for skin? Epidermis means the layer above the dermis is skin.
Right.
And I say, what is epigenetic control? And this is the revolution. Epigenetic control means control above the genes. And then we find that consciousness is what's controlling the genes. And now physics and biology are talking the same thing. Your consciousness is creating the physical expression that you have. And then, so before I turn it back to my dear friend Thomas over here, let me say this. So what's real interesting is it's a field, it's an energy, it's a belief. And I say, what is that? And I say, well, it's not physical, it's an energy, it's a vibration. You can put wires on your head and read your brain activity with the electrical activity of the brain. And I go, that's true. But you know what's that leads to is the belief, oh, my consciousness is inside my head, and if I put wires on it, I could read this. And I go, now, more important, a new device to read brain activity, not that new, but it's called magnetoencephalograph instead of electroencephalograph. I say, what's relevant? And this is the relevance that Tom is going to pick up here in a second, and that is simply this. The probe to read your brain activity in magnetoencephalograph does not touch the head at all. It's outside. And I say, significance? Your thoughts are not contained in your head. You're a tuning fork. You're broadcasting your thoughts. I could read them out here. And then, you know, why is that relevant? Well, then now I turn it back to physics, because physics is talking about a field. Each one of us is a tuning fork with the thoughts, and the power comes in creating our collective world is how many tuning forks are sharing the same vibrational frequency. How many of us are collectively amplifying a thought? And the greater the number of people, the greater the broadcast, the greater the power of that field that's being generated. And then I say, Tom, does the field have anything to do with the creation of our life?
Yeah. Now, we use some different metaphors. I don't use the term frequency very much, but we agree on all the fundamentals. And yes, you talked about how, you know, you have all these people and we're all connected and we all interact with each other. And that's just part of what I call the collective consciousness. And yes, consciousness is not physical. Consciousness is a non-physical thing. How much does consciousness weigh? You know, how much volume does it take up? You know, that sort of thing. And well, it doesn't weigh anything. It doesn't take up. It has to do with information, processing information. So yes, our consciousness is fundamental, and our physical body is not fundamental. Our physical body is actually derived from consciousness. Okay, consciousness is primary, and the physical body is secondary. So the physical body basically is a representation of the rule set that defines our virtual reality. Okay, I have metaphors that have more to do with virtual reality than have to do with you know, with tuning or radio, but we live in this virtual reality, and consciousness is the computer, if you will, and consciousness is the player, if you will. So consciousness is playing an avatar, which is our physical body, in this virtual reality. Okay, so consciousness is really the creator of the virtual reality as well. All consciousness is netted. It all connects. We all interact with each other. And because the consciousness is fundamental, it leads, the body follows, like I said before. Consciousness can modify what's in the physical world, but there are constraints. It just can't do anything. It has constraints, and those constraints are called the rule set. The rule set's what defines the virtual reality within, the physical reality. We call the rules our science. Okay, we dig out the rules from the rule set, and that's what scientists do. And some of these rules now that are more sophisticated than they were are called epigenetics rather than genetics, because that was the old model that didn't work very well. And we're beginning to see that consciousness is the creative element. Consciousness, its intent, its attitude, its feelings, its lack of fear, its lack of feeling like it's a victim. All of those things affect the physical system. And yes, we do have genetics, and those genetics do give us certain boundaries, certain constraints because of those genetics. But what we do with what we have within those constraints is a very, very large set of selections. We're not trapped by the constraints of our genetics. Yes, our genetics may say that we have a higher probability of being short rather than tall because we come from a long line of short people, but what we do with that, what we can make of it, what we can develop, what we can become, has nothing to do with being short. It's totally irrelevant of being short. Okay, if you're short, you're more likely to be a jockey and less likely to be a basketball player. So it's just a different set of choices, you see. And within any set of choices, you can do amazing, wonderful things. You can be a happy, satisfied individual. So I read some I guess it was biology or maybe neuroscience, where people saw that sheep were exhibiting moral values because the mother sheep would take in lambs of some other sheep and nurse them. And the biologists look at that, of course, particularly the ones that look at how we have evolved, and they say, well, that's counterintuitive, because she's using her valuable resources that could be used for getting her own genetic material further through the system, and she's taking that and helping some other lamb with different genetic material that's not part of hers getting through the system. That's a moral choice she's making there, and it kind of goes against the evolutionary grain. So when they killed the lamb and looked at the lamb's brain, they find that there's this little lobe, there's this little piece on the brain, and yeah, indeed, that is the place where, at least in humans, moral choice is made. And we see this sheep now has this lobe on their brain that they make moral choice. And then the conclusion was that because the brain randomly developed this lobe for moral choice, that's what enables it to make moral choices. But it's just the opposite, because the lamb learned to be moral, learned to care, because the lamb grew up, evolved its consciousness to the point that it was moral. That lobe had to develop on the brain to support that activity. So you see, it's the consciousness that leads, and the body can reconfigure itself to support the quality of that consciousness. So if that consciousness is a very happy, very positive, very creative individual, then the body will rearrange itself to support that kind of person, that kind of life. And that goes for the whole central nervous system, plus other components of the body as well. If the person is a sad sack, a victim, oh, woe is me, nothing ever, the only luck I have is bad luck, sort of a negative attitude, then that body will change to support that negative attitude and create constraints where there were no constraints, where there don't have to be any constraints. So yes, most of the constraints that we run into, both physical and mental, are constraints of our own creation. Yes, biology and genetics, give us some constraints, some things that we have to work with. But within those things, they don't limit us at all as far as the things that are important to us, which is, happiness, caring, good relationships, growing up, becoming love, that kind of thing. None of those genetic constraints have anything to do with that. You can become, as an amazing person, very successful, no matter what your constraints are.
Yeah,
The constraints just give us different challenges. Those
right.
constraints just challenge us in different ways, and all those challenges is what helps us grow up.
Yeah.
So the point here of this world is growing up, is increasing the quality of your consciousness, becoming love, getting rid of the fear, getting rid of the victimhood, being all that you can be. That's the challenge. And the fact that we have millions and millions of different ways to approach that with different constraints, well, that's good, because with diversity comes opportunity. So it's all just the way Bruce describes it.
Exactly.
We have potential, and we can do a great deal with that potential, and we should never let people convince us that we don't have that potential, that we're trapped, that we're kind of locked in. Well, we may have a different set of challenges to deal with than other people, but challenges are good. Challenges help us grow up. It's how we approach those challenges, what we do with those challenges, that's important. The challenge itself is almost irrelevant. It's what we do with the challenge that is really makes the difference.
Very important continuation of that as well. With the new understanding of epigenetics, the constraints of genetics are loosened considerably. For the significant fact is this: the old story of genetic control is like a computer program, read only. That's your gene, that's your life. But epigenetics is read write, meaning that consciousness can rewrite the genetic expression. It doesn't change the genes, it changes what's expressed by the genes. And the significance about that is, for every gene in our body, consciousness can create over 3,000 variations of proteins from each gene blueprint. And all of a sudden it says, we are a lot more plastic than people have given us credit for. They said, oh, that's your genes, you're going to get this, that's it. And I said, that's a belief that we have to change. And I really wanted to add this interesting part about consciousness as well, because I just this weekend was with one of my friends and colleagues, Aben Alexander, and he's a neuroscientist, and he wrote a book called Proof of Heaven, I think is the name of the book. And what was real interesting is because our conventional understanding in the real world of science is that consciousness is a result of brain functioning and creating consciousness. And what was interesting in Aben Alexander's story is he had a brain infection, bacterial infection, that actually destroyed his cerebral cortex. Almost everybody dies. Those that do stay alive are almost always totally impaired. And I say, well, what was the relevance of this neurosurgeon who gets this brain infection? The fact was, it broke down all the neural connections. It was destroyed. And he actually didn't even know who or what he was in his mind. He didn't even have a picture of who he was. It was just I'm here, I don't know what's going on. And what was real interesting is he had this whole life experience, all kinds of things going on. And then when he came back out of the coma that he was in after all of this, he slowly started to rebuild his conscious memory. I go, well, why is it relevant? I said, well, our conventional understanding is the brain creates all these connections, and these connections then represent our consciousness. And the fact was this: all of his connections were broken. But when the nerves came back together, the consciousness came back together. So the suggestion is a very important one, which then goes back to the physics. And that is consciousness a product of the brain, or is consciousness downloaded by the brain? And it looks right now as if the brain is a receiver. And that's why he didn't have to rebuild the memories. The memories were in the field. He had to rebuild the receiver to download the memories. And so that because he lost all of his neurons in that structure, if that was where the memory was, then by definition, he would never get his memory back again. And the fact was, it all came back. And so it really implies a very important point, Tom, that the consciousness exists as a field of its own. And
Exactly.
that the brain is a translator of it.
Yeah, well, yeah, a little, I see it a little differently, but it comes out to be about the same thing. And that is the brain sets the constraints on what the consciousness can do. But again, the consciousness is primary, you see. So the consciousness is not created by the brain. The consciousness is something very different than the brain.
Yes.
Consciousness, and you say it's in its own field. Yeah, it's its own thing. Consciousness is non-physical, and it is not created by a physical source. In fact, it's the other way around. So when he has this thing, and all his circuits are broken, whatever, that has nothing to do with his consciousness. His consciousness is still whole and still viable, and still has all, retains all the memory, everything else. So the brain just sets constraints. So he had the disease that created a lot of constraints for what his consciousness could do with that avatar. So he just laid there in a coma. That's about all he could do. But he had, as consciousness, he had an intent, and his intent was to not give up, but to rebuild that brain, to come back, to be as much as he could be with whatever state he was in. He didn't, he'd just given up all hope. If he'd just been in there and said, well, I guess this is it, I'm gone, there's nothing else. Again, if he'd been a victim, then he would have been like everybody else. He never would have recovered. But somewhere in this person, he had this spark that said, I don't accept that. I'm going to come back and I'm going to rebuild it. And as he did that, the brain started to reconfigure to express the consciousness. So exactly. I see consciousness as a different, independent thing. And it's not so much that the brain downloads it, but the brain sets constraints for it.
Yes.
But those constraints are not, it's not like this is a constraint and you can't change it. The constraints are all plastic. So the constraints can be modified by the intent. And the brain can change, just like with the sheep. The sheep grew up to the point that it made moral choices. Therefore, the brain reconstructed itself to provide a support for that in the physical world. Like, so the rule set could support it in the physical world. So it goes that way. Absolutely right. Consciousness is a separate thing. And in the way I look at reality, the brain does not compute anything. It doesn't remember anything. It doesn't analyze anything. All that's done in consciousness. All the brain does, all the body does, the whole body, the whole physical world, what it does is it sets constraints on what the consciousness can do within a system. And those constraints are plastic. Those constraints have to do with the rule set. But the rule set doesn't prohibit him from reorganizing brain tissue. He can do that with his intent, because our intent modifies future probability. That's how we do that. That's how the placebo effect works. Our intent modifies future probability. If we have intentions that we are going to be healthy, that we're not going to succumb to that disease, that we will be, because our intent modifies future probability. But again, it's only probability, and doesn't mean that you can always get whatever you want. It just means that with your intent, you can always make it more likely that you move in the direction that you want to move in. So placebo effect works because we can change the probability of what's going to happen.
Well, that's the nature of why epigenetics is so important, because it's that interface between the consciousness and the mechanism which allows you to make that plastic change
Right.
and change it. While I was at the same conference, a friend of mine, another author, Anita Morjani, she wrote a book, Dying to Be Me. She had 4 years of cancer, and she's been under doctor care for 4 years. She goes into last stages of her life. They bring her in the hospital. She's on a machine for breathing and for the nutrition. She's on machines all plugged up. She's emaciated. Her cancer lumps are sticking out of her body because of the emaciation, and then she goes into a coma. Now her consciousness is not working from the brain at this moment. The brain is like on idle, but she has these experiences of another existence outside the conscious experiences.
Sure.
And what was most important about it, because I see her as the poster child of biology, I believe, was she realized out of body why her physiology, why her cancer and all that, when it had a lot to do with her consciousness and fears and all that stuff. And then she resolved the issues with her father, which was the big personal issue in her life because she let her father down so much. And her father said, no, that, what happened on earth is, your love, everything's pure love, blah, blah, blah. And what was so interesting about it was her father said, it's really not your time to be dead. You have to go back. And she looked at her body like on this bed, with all emaciated with cancer. It's like, yeah, right. I really want to go back. But she loved her husband who was holding her hand the entire time. And she said, if I die, he's going to get sick. So I'm going to go back. But she went back now with what? A complete awareness of the issues that led to the cancer, the fears and all that stuff. She came back out of that coma, and in 3 days, 70% of the cancer disappeared. And in 4 weeks, the entire body was cancer-free. And here's a woman who was at the end, whose oncologist said, there's, nobody comes back from this. This is the end. And not only did she come back, but with a change of consciousness, she enters back into her body, and within days, the entire thing is gone. And that's the plasticity, that's the consciousness, that's the mechanism between consciousness and biology, epigenetics, that allows that interface to occur.
Exactly.
And I also want to say, because when you really talk about the nature of that consciousness, this is one of the things that profoundly changed my life, because I was a conventional biology guy teaching conventional medicine and genetics and all that stuff like that. And when I understood the nature that my consciousness was separate from my physical reality, I also understood the most profound point, and that is, we cannot die because we're not even in here. And I say, well, why is it relevant? And if you really understand, and we go back in the history of a child, perhaps the most important life influencing piece of information that a child picks up is mortality. That people die, animals die, things die, I die. And from that moment of recognizing your life has an ending with death, the fear of death is the motivation that drives people to do anything they can to avoid the fear, paying for whatever they have to pay, and giving up power, saying, I don't want to die, somebody has to help me, not recognizing that you're creating this, and you can't die because you're not even in here. This is a virtual reality suit. You get into the suit. I call, just very quickly, so I don't want to take your time, Tom, but I want to just say, the analogy that I use in my lectures is simply this. I want to know what Mars is like. What's it like to live on Mars? I can't send anybody. So I send up what's called a Mars rover, a little go-kart thing with sensors and cameras and everything. And I say, well, how's it work? I say, well, there's a guy at NASA, sends a signal to the rover and drives it around. And then all the sensory devices on the rover pick up all the information about what's going on and send it back using the same antenna back to the guy at NASA. So I say, what's really important is if the batteries die on the rover, the guy at NASA didn't die. He's still there. So now the connection is this. I see us as Earth rovers, that we are picking up a signal. We're driving the vehicle around. We're having life experiences, and the experiences are being broadcast back to the field, changing my karma, my life experiences like that. But the simple reality is we're not in this Earth rover body. We get to, we get to use it to have experiences, to be creative. And the joke that I think is maybe the greatest cosmic joke in the world is that the religious people say, well, you live according to our morality rules, you'll get a chance to go to heaven when you're dead. And I would like to suggest a completely different scenario. We are born into heaven. This is where we came to create, and that we are creators. The only problem is we're also programmed to get the machine off the ground. And if the program is defective in getting us off the ground, that programming in the first 7 years, the rest of our life is like we have bad driving skills. We didn't get the good driving skill. And your work, Tom, is important for us all to understand. We are the driver of the vehicle, and we have choices, we have options, we have ability to do all these things until we give it away and give the power to somebody else to make decisions for us.
Yes. The problem is that we identify ourselves as the body when what we actually are is the consciousness. That's
precise.
Yeah, that's the problem. And it's actually set up that way because when the consciousness that starts with a particular, that is, well, let me back up. You have kind of the communication metaphor where you're communicating. So you're downloading like the Mars rover does back down to the Earth. I have the virtual reality metaphors where we're the player, okay? And our body is the elf, like in World of Warcraft. That's our body, it's the elf. We're the player though, and the player gets to make all the choices for the elf. That elf by itself doesn't do anything. It doesn't process anything, doesn't remember anything, doesn't do anything, but we're the player. So we are consciousness, and we're playing this elf, and we get to make all the elf's choices. Every choice, every interaction is ours, and that's the way it works. So it's the same thing, but rather than sending signals back and forth, it's a more of a digital viewpoint that there's a computer that's the server, of course, that serves up the virtual reality, and we are that server exists also in consciousness. Consciousness is a information system, and we are chunks of consciousness playing a body. And our choices and our intents can modify what happens in that physical world. Okay, that's one of the neat things here. So we can do that. But people make the mistake that we are bodies. They identify with the body. But no, nobody dies. Your consciousness doesn't die. When your elf dies in the World of Warcraft, the player doesn't die. The player just, has to either get another elf, or it runs back to the graveyard where that elf appears, and then they have run back to wherever that elf died and collect all their spells and stuff again. But there's a mechanism to get back into the game. And that's the way our reality works as well. So we're just the players. We make all the choices. We're consciousness. We're not really an avatar. We're consciousness. And that avatar it basically represents the constraints of the game. You see, that's what the avatar represents. It represents all the constraints of the game. We cannot flap our arms and fly away as humans because it just doesn't work. We're too heavy, and the little palms of our hands don't move enough air, and we just can't do that, okay? So the rule set doesn't support it, so we can't do it. It's just the nature of the rule set. But we can modify what happens in that physical reality with our intentions. The computer will let us create in the physical reality with our intention. So as we have intentions for things to manifest in the physical reality, they will. But again, it's not like we have a genie with an infinite number of wishes. It's that we can affect probabilities. And this is a feedback that helps us grow up and take responsibility for ourselves and our choices. We have this feedback. We help create this reality. Everybody thinks they're a body, and nobody is. Everybody is immortal. They're immortal because they're consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And that body is just a tool they get to use to play this game, to make choices. And by those choices, they move toward fear, or they move toward love and caring and being about other. They move toward being self-focused and self-centered, or they move toward having a bigger picture, having empathy, and having caring. And those are the choices we get. And our consciousness is here to make those choices and to evolve itself, to raise the quality of its consciousness, to get rid of the fear, if you will, get rid of that ego, get rid of those beliefs that are trapping us in kind of in a stasis. We get these beliefs, and belief is a trap.
Mm-hmm.
The things you believe, you manifest.
Yeah.
So it's the same sort of thing. You've got the communications metaphors about calling home, and we're the guy that's manipulating that rover. And I have the exact same thing. We're the consciousness, and we're the ones making the choices of what that avatar does. But the avatar itself is just a pretty picture. It's a picture that lets us see the results of our choices and our interaction with all the other players. But we're the consciousness, and we are the creative element.
I'm 100% with you on that, Tom, because it's exactly the same kind of story I try to tell people, especially when it comes to epigenetics, because consciousness is the switching mechanism for that epigenetics that determines the outcome. Mind, very important definition of mind in my perception. Mind, the function of mind is to create coherence between your beliefs and your reality. So you come in with a bunch of beliefs about it, and the function of mind is to generate a behavior that will complement and be coherent with those beliefs. So if you believe you're a victim, you become a victim. If you believe you're a master, then you become a master. So it's really trying to get that out of the way. And it also touches on something very important, because when you bring up the avatar, the elf, there's an interesting aspect about that as well, and that is this: each of us has a unique biological identity. And I mean, in this regard, I cannot take my cells or organs out of my body and put it into anybody else's body without their immune system saying not self and rejecting it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, right away it says, well, your cells must have a self on them, because when you put it in the other body, the immune system says this isn't our self. So there's a reading of what that self is. And it turns out the self is a set of protein antennas built into the outer surface of the cell. And no two people have the same set of antennas. It's like a giant combination lock. And I say, why is it relevant? Because in this lifetime right now, my avatar is this Bruce body, and it's receiving my broadcast. Now, the issue about this is if I die, my broadcast, as we both agree, is still there. My consciousness is still there. But I have to wait for another body to show up with the same antennas that I can then play back into my avatar. Now, what's interesting about that is, does it have to be male or female? And the answer is no. That's just the physical body. It's the antennas that determine if it's me as an identity or not. Okay, what is it? White, black, yellow, brown, red? I go, that's the avatar. That's not me. I'm the broadcast. And so this also brings in the most important aspect of an understanding that this is not our first time we've been here. We've been here before. And different avatars, as you said. So the elf gets dead, but then guess what? A new one can come back in with the same antennas, and we're back online again. And so this is a real exciting part. I think the most important part for the general public about what we just said is, if you fully get this, if you fully get it, the fear of death will disappear. Because then you start to realize, I can't die, I'm not even in here. And once you can master that, then you can master about anything. If you have lost the fear of death, as that's my only existence, and oh my God, if I die, I'm not existent, that's an incorrect assumption. And Tom's field talk, which he just brought up, is the emphasis of the same thing that I see in biology. I work on the connection between the consciousness and the avatar. Tom works on the power of the consciousness even without the avatar, and yet it's the very same story. And that's the beautiful part when biology and physics come together. There's an opportunity for personal empowerment.
Well said. That's incredible. I love seeing the similarities, even though there's a few different metaphors. You're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's great because it reaches a larger audience. It reaches more people.
Yeah.
I just want to ask a question around epigenetics and modifying your avatar, how your consciousness modifies your biology.
Yes.
Body follows. And so how does that work? Because like I was saying, I tried Psyche, I tried EFT, I've tried hypnosis, all these different things to kind of get into the subconscious so I can make that change.
Yes.
I'm failing at that. So maybe.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why you might be failing at that, Vanessa. And one, most of us exist on kind of two levels. We exist on an intellectual level, and we exist then at our core, kind of at a being level, our intuitive level, if you like, our feeling level is kind of the being level. Well, those two levels don't always have the same attitude. They always don't have the same direction. And your intellect may be saying, I want to change. I want to be different. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to learn these other things. But
I want to lose 20 pounds.
I want to lose 20 pounds. Right. I want to do whatever, So your intellect can say all those things and your intellect can mean it. But just because your intellect thinks it, that's like making a wish. It doesn't carry a lot of force. Where you have to have the change is at that being level, at that intuitive level, at the level of feeling and just the level of who you are at your core, not your intellect. So I think what happens is that most of us, yes, we'd like to lose weight, we'd like to eat better, we'd like to do all these kinds of things, but that's what we think we should do. And we're doing it because our intellect says that's a better thing to do and we should do it. But if we're not really committed to it, if we're not really doing it from the core of ourselves, then nothing much happens. It's just an intellectual game, which is a very weak game. Now, if at the very core of your being, at your being level, at your feeling and intuitive level, if there's where your mind is made up, wow, things happen very quickly and very powerfully. I've known any number of people who, let's say, wanted to quit smoking cigarettes. And they'd try and they'd fail and they'd try and they'd fail and they'd try and they fail. And that's because they thought they should quit, because people don't like their bad breath. People don't like the smell on their clothes. People don't like breathing their smoke. So they think, well, people don't like us, I really should quit. But that's different than really wanting to quit. You see, there's a difference of thinking you should and actually feeling like you must. That's something that's core to you. So those are the differences. And I've seen other people who have smoked their lives decide that they're going to quit, do it at a fundamental, intuitive, basic core level, walk away from those cigarettes and never smoke another one, never have withdrawal, never feel like they want a cigarette. They just walk away and they're done with it. And the difference is, one's an intellectual thing that's trying to force your way to do something that you're really not that interested in doing because it's too much work or you don't know how or some other reason. But when the core of you decides to make a change, then the change happens. And just like the lady who had the cancer, you see, intellectually she could say, oh, I don't want this cancer. I want to live and I want to do this and I want to do that. But she's got all this fear and all this stuff, you see, that's really at the core of her that is creating the problem. But once she gets to that core, once at her being level, she offloads all that fear, then stuff can happen fast and powerfully, because that's where your ability to modify the future, the future probabilities, That connects from your being level. So that's why so many people try things. They take courses, they go read books, they just do all this stuff, and they're so disappointed because nothing really happens. That's because it's all an intellectual game. They're making wishes, they're not really making changes. Changes have to come from an intuitive level. It has to be you. You know, it's like the difference in, you know, being kind and acting kind. Well, anybody can act kind, particularly if other people are watching. You know, other people are watching and we all act very nice and we're very polite. But the difference is that one of the persons, the one that's being kind, really is kind, period. It doesn't have to think about doing the right thing or helping people. It just does it because that's the way they are. No thoughts about it. But if it's just because you've learned politeness in your culture and you say, well, okay, you know, there's a little old lady, I'll help her. Here's a lady full of packages, I'll open the door. I want to be helpful, I want to be whatever. But you're doing it because you think you should, because you've been trained, because you've been taught. Well, that's civilizing, but it doesn't help you grow up any. It's not really powerful. It doesn't change reality. But once you get it at the being level, yeah, you can go from stage 4 hopeless cancer to cancer-free overnight. You know, it doesn't take much time. That's the difference. So yes, you'd like to do these things and you read about them and your intellect says, yeah, I want that. But you're not yet convinced at a being level to let go of the fear that you have to let go of in order to actually make it work. There's these fears that you have, and you know, like you're trying to be a better person. Why? Because you probably have a fear that you're not really as good a person as you need to be. So it's that fear that's driving it, not really you becoming the better person. It's the fear that you're not such a good person that makes you want to try real hard to act like a better person. Acting is different than being.
So
And
in the example of like wanting to lose 20 pounds, I've traced it back and I'm like, well, maybe the fear is the fear of I'm trying to protect myself and I don't want anybody to get close. So if I have an extra 20 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. There's some fear in there that likes that extra 20 pounds and doesn't want to let go of it. And that's the fear that keeps it there. And you can diet all you want, but you will always sabotage yourself and not get there. But the day that you decide you really want to lose it, you'll see that, you know, weeks later, you'll lose it. Your mind is a very powerful thing. It really can change reality, you know, in the physical system particularly. The reason it can change the physical system so well, like in biology, is that in the physical system, there's so much uncertainty. There's so much choice. Like Bruce says, you know, you have a gene, but that gene has thousands of ways of expressing itself. There's all of this choice. And where you have choice, now you can modify future probability with strength. Where you have little uncertainty, everything's kind of buttoned down. Now it's more difficult to modify things with your intent. But biology is a wonderful place because there's so much choice, so many ways that it can go together, so many possibilities, so much uncertainty that what'll happen. Because, you know, people get stage 4 cancer and are hopeless and get over it. I mean, that happens all the time. It probably happens, you know, to a couple of people, you know, every day. Okay, they're still the 100th of 1%, but it happens all the time. Biology is a immensely variable thing, and that makes it the perfect candidate for the mind to change it, to manipulate it.
Well, this is also recognized in biology, and the fact that when we talk about the mind, there's almost a singularity, the mind. And the fact is, no, there are two interdependent elements to this mind. One of them is the right behind your forehead, prefrontal cortex is the latest evolution of the brain. And this is the conscious mind. This is the one connected to our field, our source, our spirit, our identity. 90% of the brain is the subconscious mind, which means it operates without any thinking involved. It's habit. Conscious mind is creative. Subconscious mind is habit. Now, the interesting part about it is the habit part gets programmed into your brain the first 7 years, you're in a state of theta brain function, which is hypnosis. And that's how we download basic behaviors of how to be a member of a family and a community, by observing all those people around us, our parents, siblings, and community. And these are downloads without going into conscious mind. They go straight into subconscious. Okay. Now the problem about it is this: 70% of those downloaded programs are deemed to be disempowering, self-sabotaging, limiting behaviors. And you say, okay, but I don't need to operate from subconscious, because I can use my conscious creative mind to create that heaven on earth or whatever I want to create. And I go, well, this is really good. Now, except here's the problem. The conscious mind also is capable of thinking. I say, well, what's the relevance? I say, the conscious mind can drive the vehicle creatively. And I say, if I ask you what you want out of your life, wishes, desires, aspirations, that's a creative expression of what you would like. I say, if the conscious mind's driving the vehicle, then it's going to engage neurological behavior to move toward that destination. But here's the failure. 95% of the day, the conscious mind's engaged in thinking. And I say, why is that relevant? Because thinking is an inside job. If I ask you, tell me what you're doing at Sunday at 2 o'clock, you have to go inside and go, you're trying to picture what am I doing on Sunday? I go, here's the issue, and this is the crux of the whole problem that we've all been talking about here. And the crux is this: when I'm conscious, I have my hands on the wheel, I'm driving my vehicle toward wishes, desires, and aspirations. But when I'm thinking, I have to let go of the wheel, because I'm going to go inside and process now. But I say, yeah, but that doesn't mean I stop everything. If I have a thought, I just stop. I mean, I could be walking down the street and have a thought and continue walking, or driving the car and have a thought, and I'm still driving the car. I go, well, then who's driving and who's walking? Well, my conscious mind got busy inside. And the answer is subconscious is autopilot. The moment conscious lets go, programming takes over. Well, if my programming is negative, then that means when I'm thinking, and the behavior that's coming out of me at this moment, I'm not observing it. And the simple reason is why? Conscious mind's inside. It's not seeing what's going on outside. So whatever behavior is playing when I'm thinking, generally I'm not paying attention to it, because I'm inside. And then when you find out, well, 70% of those downloaded programs you're operating from are disempowering and self-sabotaging, and all of a sudden you say, oh my God, 95% of the day, my device, my avatar, is on like a habit control. It's under subconscious behavior. Why? Because my conscious spirit is busy thinking, so it's not paying attention. And I say, well, why is it relevant? Because then it says about 95% of the behavior that you do every day is not even visible to your conscious mind. I go, why is that relevant? I say, well, if most of that is disempowering or self-sabotaging and you don't even see it, then all you see is the consequence. That I had wishes and desires, conscious mind, wishes and desires, but my life is not manifesting them. And then all of a sudden they feel like a victim. Why? Well, I wanted to be successful and it's not working. It must be the universe. And it turns out, no, 95% of the day you're shooting yourself in the foot with these bad behaviors, and you don't even see you're the one with the gun. So at the end of the day, you come home and you go, boy, universe is against me. It's not in my nature to be successful, because I went forward this morning with great wishes and I come home with nothing. And therefore, this is the problem of the world, to my point of view, is take that and understand this. Then everyone feels they're victims. Why? Well, I wouldn't have created this mess. If it was up to my consciousness, I wouldn't have done this. And I go, but you're not operating from consciousness. 95% of the day you're operating from program. And since other people put the program in, then you're not even operating from your wishes and desires. You're operating from their programs. And this is like why if a child gets adopted into a family with cancer, guess what? The adopted child will get the same cancer as the family siblings get. But the adopted child has totally different genetics. What was the point? Cancer isn't due to genes. Less than 10% of cancer is even connected to heredity. Cancer is epigenetics. as Tom was bringing about. If you have a negative aspect of life and that's your perception, you're going to adjust your genetics to express negative. I mean, the point again, the function of the mind is to take that program and make it real. Now, if you got a negative programming, but you don't see it because you're thinking, and the mind is going to work with that program, it's going to manifest it, whether it's negative or positive. And since most are negative, then we look at the world as a life of struggle, as victim. We give up our power, because if you feel you have no power, you will pay anybody anything to protect you when you feel so vulnerable, when in fact, as an emphasis again on Tom, that he says, we are creating this. If you don't like the creation and you understand the mechanism, you can change your creation. Yep. If you don't understand it, you are whatever the program is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with all of that. We just use different terms, but it all comes out to be about the same thing. Yeah, I talk about the fears. You have all this fear inside you, and that fear dominates 98% of all your choices. Those choices you make, they're because of the fears you have inside, and that's what you're calling the programming.
Absolutely, that's where we got it.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Tom.
That dominates, and then you have an ability to kind of rise above that.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned to Vanessa, you said, well, if there's a weight issue, you have a conscious wish. I want to lose 20 pounds. I say, that's great. How much is that working during the day? 5%. I say, what's happening 95% of the day? The point is, why did you get the weight? And Tom, you brought that out. You said, because at some point that was maybe a means of protection. That if I'm heavy, people will leave me alone, and I won't be a victim. So your subconscious is going to save your life by what? Keeping you overweight, because that's the program. I got to protect myself. Right. And the conscious mind's going, I don't want this weight. And I go, yeah, well, 5% of the day is not going to change the 95% coming from the program.
Yep. Yeah, it all works out. However you say it, it all works out the same way, doesn't it?
That's why I like working with you, Tom, for a very simple reason. Is like, when you really want to learn something, the more different ways you put it into the system, the greater the opportunity to make that change. So, like hearing it, seeing it, writing it, smelling it, tasting it, every time an input comes in, that reinforces it. So you and I are having a wonderful time. Why? Yeah. We're giving the same story from a slightly different vocabulary. Why? Because your vocabulary is physics, my vocabulary is biology. And yet both of them at this moment in time are complementing each other. And that's the beautiful part, because physics is the more valid of all sciences on this planet. And biology is conforming to it.
Yeah, well, yeah, physics is at the root of things, but diversity is important, because there's a certain group of people who will hear it expressed in terms of biology and can get it better there than if they hear it expressed in terms of physics. And there's another group that's just the opposite. And there's other groups that won't get either one of those, but they'll get it from some yogi that, is telling them things. So we need this diversity. It's important. It's not that we should all hash it out and come up with one story. No, we're all different.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, we need to approach it from thousands of different directions, because that opens up opportunities for lots of different kinds of people to get there. So it's tremendous that we have so many different ways of saying the same thing. And, I'm fond of saying that there's only one truth, just one truth, but there are thousands and thousands of pathways that will take you to that truth.
Yes.
And they're all valid, and they're all important, and they all are part of the solution.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. That's why I love that man, because he could say good stuff.
You guys, before we wrap it up, I kind of feel like I'm left hanging, like, yeah, okay, it's the fear, but like, how do I get rid of the fear then? Like, what do I do with it?
Well, it's another part of the same thing. You can't get rid of the fear just by wishing it away. If you just say, well, I just don't want that fear, well, okay, but that's not going to change much. Again, you really need to get committed. You need to get down to where you, in Bruce's language, you need to get rid of that programming. In my
Yeah,
language, you need to
exactly.
get rid of that fear. You know,
Uh,
you need to get rid of the basic fear that is driving your choices. And once you get rid of the fear that's driving your choices, now your choices can be made and you can change your life much more easily because you're taking your life back rather than let your fear drive the boat or drive the car. You're in charge. You're
right.
taking responsibility for everything that you're doing. And that's the difference. So how do you get rid of it? Thinking about it and making a plan isn't going to do it. You're going to have to change the way your perspective. You have to change the way you look at yourself. You have to change the way you look at reality. You have to change your whole perspective on life to where that programming, that fear, you see it for what it is, and you kind of go beyond it. You don't let that control you. You get rid of it. And you can't just let that stuff sit in there and ignore it. You actually have to get rid of it. You've got to get into the programs and rip them out by the roots and get rid of them. You can't just wall them off and say, well, all right, I'm not going to pay attention to that anymore. That won't work. You got to rip them out one by one until you get rid of each one of them. And every time you rip one out, you feel empowered. You feel more in charge. You feel more responsible because now you're not just a zombie going through life because, you know, doing what your fear tells you to do. So that's how you get rid of the fears. You have to really want to enough to work on it to find out what is that fear? What is that program that's running you? Identify it, grab it, tear it out by the roots and get rid of it. And that's not an easy thing to do. It's a lot easier to say than it is to do. But still, you can do it if you have an intent that is consistent and you steadily keep your mind focused on getting rid of it. It'll go away. You will get rid of it. So
Well,
that's how you do it.
and that's 100% agree on Tom, but I also have to add this is that the two minds, the conscious mind connected to that personal identity, that spirit field, or whatever you want to call it, the creative mind, learns in different ways than the subconscious mind, which is the habit mind. And you're right, 95% of the day, if you're going to be playing habits, I don't care what your conscious wishes and desires are, the 95% of the day is going to still play the program. And as you said, Tom, you have to take this program out and rewrite it, replace it. And yet you have to recognize this, is that you'd have to do it in the manner that subconscious mind learns. Because that's how you want to teach it. And conscious mind learns because it's creative in any number of ways. You know, listening to us just talk right now can change conscious mind, but it doesn't change the habit mind, because habit mind by definition is resistant. Otherwise, it's not a habit. A habit means it's like, I got the program and that's my program. If it changes every day, then it can't be a habit. So a habit mind learns in different ways. And then when we learn how to rewrite the programs in the subconscious mind, that's when those fears that you talk about can be eliminated and replaced with much more positive programming. But we must recognize just having a positive thinking in your conscious mind is not necessarily or easily in any sense going to change a program. You actually have to engage a different behavior. And that's why the failure of the system is like, oh, I'll just think different. And I go, I don't care if you think different, that's conscious. You can think different all you want 5% of the day, but you're going to still play the exact same programs that you got 95% of the day until those programs are changed. And this is what Tom is talking about, eliminating the fear, is you must rewrite the limitation programs that we acquired in the first 7 years of our life.
Mm. And what do you think is the collective program for the human condition that is perpetuating this victim mentality?
I think what's perpetuating is that there are people who know that I can program you, and when I program you, I own you. And that's the name of the game. The Jesuits have said for 400 years, give me a child until it is 7 and I will show you the man. They actually knew this mechanism, that it was 7 years of programming, and that whatever that 7 years of programming is, 95% of your life is going to come from that program. Therefore, give me the child until he's 7. I will show you the man. Is they already knew you're going to play this program until you change it. That program is yours for the rest of your life.
Yeah. If I had to comment on kind of, if you're looking at the big picture, all the people, you know, all humanity together, I would say that, and this is in complement to what Bruce says, and that is the reason we as a whole are the way we are is an individual thing. There's nothing that's going to change us en masse. There's nothing that's going to, you know, nobody's going to wave a wand and suddenly we all become enlightened. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
It works one person at a time. Everybody has to find that inner truth, that you know, that themselves. They have to root out those fears, you know, get rid of their programming. They have to do that one at a time, individually. You can't rip out anybody else's program. You can only rip out your own. You're the only person you can fix. So that's how you change the world. If you want to change the world, you start by changing yourself. The only way that you can help somebody else change their own programming, get rid of their fears, is to give them a safe, secure, caring, non-judgmental environment. If you give them that environment, that gives them at least a higher probability that they can reach out and grab those programs and get rid of them. They can deal with that fear because they're in a safe, nurturing place. So if you can give other people that safe, nurturing place, that will help them get rid of their own fears, but you can't get rid of their fears for them.
No.
They have to do it. And until they take that responsibility to do it, we will continue to live in a world very much like the one we live in, because that's the way we are. This world is a reflection of us, and it has to happen. I mean, we have to get over it one person at a time, basically. There's no big thing, and nobody's going to write a book that has all the answers to it, and then everybody reads it, and suddenly we're all enlightened. It doesn't work that way.
No.
It's not what's in our intellect. It's not, you know, from reading the book. It's at the being level. It's who we are. It's those programs and those fears. You don't get that from a book. You only get that from serious internal work and effort, because you want to get rid of it. So that's kind of the key. And we share, because we interact conscious to consciousness. We have this collective consciousness. If you're in a world where 90% of the people are victims and sad and unhappy and struggling and not satisfied with who they are in life, well, you tend to take on that mopey attitude too, because you're in this soup with all of these people who are dysfunctional, unhappy, you see. Whereas if you keep company only with people who are very positive and, you know, have great outlooks and feel like the world is terrific, and well, that kind of pulls you up too. So we have this inertia, if you like. That's part of the problem. The feedback we get from each other is, you know, fear. I mean, all you have to do is go on the internet and you can find, if there's anything possible that somebody could be afraid of, there's some group of people somewhere who, you know, are talking about it and beating those fear drums and making it as scary as possible. Fear is everywhere, and that affects us. So we pull each other down. So it makes it even more challenging for us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, to let go of that fear, get rid of the programming, and be authentic. That's a tough challenge. Like I say, real easy to say, a lot harder to do, but it can be done if you really take it seriously and you really want to do it. So
I'd like to just emphasize what you just said there before we sign off, because it was so important, and I think people should hear it again. And that is, you can change yourself, but you can't change somebody else unless they want to be changed. And this is very hard, because when we have loved ones and you see them going off the track, and you're going to put so much energy to try to get them back on the track, if they're not ready to get on the track, then that energy is just wasted energy. So we really have to look at this as an individual basis. And Tom's right. You can fix yourself and you can make suggestions, but it doesn't mean you can change anybody else. And that will help us, because so much frustration comes from seeing loved ones not being in the right place. and then having a personal human heart that wants to help, and then realize, look, it won't help until they are ready to change.
Right. And you can get into that boat, particularly with family, like you say, particularly with loved ones, and that can bring you down because you're so frustrated that, you know, you just want to take these two people and knock their heads together and say, stop fighting, you know, stop this dysfunctional behavior. And of course, they don't see it that way. And if you feel, if that makes you feel bad or is a downer for you, well, then that's a problem. Then that becomes part of your own problem, part of your own fear. And you have to realize that you're not in charge of the world and you're not in charge of other people. You have to let other people be who they are. That everybody here is struggling. They're doing the best they can with the beliefs and the fears and the programming and all of that stuff that they've got. And they're struggling with it. And that struggle is their natural feedback. When the pain gets to be enough, maybe they'll see a better approach. And yes, you can offer suggestions, and yes, you can provide alternatives, but you can't make anything happen until they do it themselves. And that, yeah, I guess what you need to be is not part of their problem. Because you see, if you go to those two people and you say, stop it, folks, you're both dysfunctional, you're both just, you know, doing negative stuff, and you know, it's all your programming that's causing that. What you will do is make it worse for everybody. It'll be worse for them because now they're going to retract more into their beliefs because you confronted them, and you're going to feel bad because, you know, you can't help. And now they're both angry at you, and, you know, it just makes everything worse. So you have to get to the point that it is the way it is. People are the way they are. Love them, care for them, give them support, show them a better way, be a good example, but otherwise, focus on yourself. You've got plenty to work on. You don't have to go out helping other people before you start working on your own issues first.
Thank you, Tom. I so appreciate being once again with you on this, and I so appreciate your wisdom. It's so important for all of us to really get this and work with it. Vanessa, I want to thank you for letting me be in this community and talk to all those wonderful cultural creatives out there that are looking for the better way. The answers to life is let's create something different. And Tom's words are super critical in understanding the nature of that creativity. So thank you both very much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Bruce, for coming and joining us. It's always great to get another perspective and another set of metaphors and ways of looking at a problem, because it gives people a much bigger perspective. And that's good. You know, the more people that we can share this kind of message with, then the more we're part of the solution.
I love that.
And that's basically what it's all about, right? One at a time. We help other people see a bigger picture. Yeah, it's neat though. You know, right now I'm tied up with a bunch of physics experiments that are going to show that this is a virtual reality.
Yes.
And it's, to me, you know, I'm doing all this physics stuff, but the real core, the stuff that really matters, is really the stuff we've been talking about. I mean, physics is nice, but, you know, it's better to understand that this theory is not just science. Oh, science, okay, let the scientists take care of that. You know, it doesn't have anything to do with me. You know, well, it does. This is a piece of science. The stuff that Bruce is doing and the stuff that I'm doing and a lot of other people are doing, it is science, and it does have to do with everybody. It has to do with all of us. It has to do with the quality of your life, whether you're miserable or whether you're happy. You know, it has to do with basic things like that. Are you in charge of your life, or is your life in charge of you? You know, and it's important, but it does make sense. It is good science, and you can do physics with it. It's better physics, but physics isn't the big thing. Even though I'm a physicist, just like for you, I'm sure biology isn't the big thing. The big thing is letting people know that they're not in a trap.
Exactly.
People know that they have control. They're not locked into a you know, a lot of things happening to them. They can take charge, and that's really the the message that is important to get out to the average person.
So thank you both of you for putting that out there and sharing this with everyone. I hope we don't wait 5 years again to use I hope we can do this again soon.
Yeah, I wish Bruce didn't live so far away, but he's out on a mountaintop out on the coast, and I'm up in the woods of my little hangout on the edge of a mountain, and we don't get to meet very often. So this is particularly nice that get to share a little time.
Long lasting, as I know from the last time. There's still our words are still out there. So that's a great expression of the power of what you're saying and how people are holding on to that truth. So, but I just really wanted to say thank you both. Thank you, Tom, for your time. So important. And Vanessa for putting us together and making this work right.
Absolutely. My honor.
You're welcome. And for Bruce, taking the time out of your schedule to come and talk with me. Thank you.
I love to talk with you, dear Tom. Thank you so much. And I hope people listen to this guy on my video screen on my right, my dear friend Tom, because his words are wonderful truth for the world, for us today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Bye.
Bye.